Hello there. My name is Martin Michalik. I am the VP of Product here at Kontent.ai, and today I want to talk about the rise of Agentic CMS. But I actually want to start my session with an observation. During my years as a VP of Product here at Content, I had the pleasure of talking to a number of content teams, product teams, technical teams, and every single time when the conversation that gets to the point where we start discussing the CMS and surrounding tech stack, people rarely smile, which was always odd to me because the goal of content management was to me always simple: make lives of content teams easier. However, something else happened along the way. Things got more complicated. Teams got more responsibilities, and their days are now much more complicated and chaotic. So I was wondering what happened and whether there's a way out of this. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how AI is changing the game. And I want to talk about a technology shift that I believe is more than just another CMS rebrand. I believe it's a shift that will essentially make a CMS finally your partner in content production. So let's get into it. The great thing about content management market in general is that the CMS solutions were always evolving. And when you think about it, we started back in the 2000s, where we've seen the rise of web-centric CMS that allowed teams essentially reuse templates for their pages. It gave them the power of publishing the pages themselves and customize these templates so they were less dependent on developers. Then we've seen the coming of the XP era, where content management systems were expanded. Functionalities such as marketing automation, email marketing, or specialized analytics were added. So teams suddenly could run the whole campaigns and evaluate how they're doing. Then we've seen the rise of headless CMS that separated the presentation and the content itself. So teams could create content once and distribute it to many touch points. Again, great improvement from a technology standpoint. And then we've seen the circle closing, and we've seen the coming of composable / modular DXPs that allowed teams to pick portions of the technology they want to use and create their own unique tech stack. All this evolution is great, and it might seem on the first hand that customers have more to choose from, which they do. It's also nice because we are seeing nice competition that pushes us as a solution forward. However, despite all these technology advancements and the amazing improvements, the market became a bit more, difficult to navigate for customers, because despite all these amazing advancements, there are still underlying problems that are not addressed. And the interesting thing about those problems is that they are the same issues we've seen over the last 10 years, and we've heard them over and over again. And they're boiling down to the same two limits. The limits centered around time and people. Because in those conversations we had with prospects and clients and with agencies, we've heard that the issues were centered around lengthy migrations, content complexity when it comes to content operations, slow time to publish. It takes too long to get content out, so the teams are in more reactive mode than proactive mode. We've also heard stories about staffing issues. Teams were lacking specialized knowledge in their teams, so they couldn't do certain activities. We've also experienced limitations when it comes to technical talent. I remember this particularly well. It was a time when people were moving off web forms to MVC, so a different shift in technology. And overall, in all these years, people were still somewhat dependent in the content team on the development capacity. So there was a lot of interdependencies between those teams. So these two variables were always persistent there. It was always there, and the issues were centered around them. And you could think that over time, as the technology was progressing, that they were less and less prevalent. However, the reality is slightly different. We've seen improvements, but as the technology was improving, the content demands were growing, and especially in the last few years, the technology demands were significantly scaling, and they were growing in exponential demand because we've seen explosion of content everywhere, and I believe we all feel it. I don't think there's a person in this world that would, in the evening sit on the couch and said, well, I wish there was more content I could consume. It's rather the contrary. So we've for sure seen growth in content demand, but when it comes to teams' capacity, we've seen rather stagnation or in some cases reduction, because some companies were reducing their spend on their marketing operations. So from the point of view of the content team, it was something like this. Their lives are not easy these days because they need to deliver results. They're struggling with capacities, and the pressure is much, much higher than ever before. And the reason why I'm talking about this, about these issues they face, is because I do believe there's a way out of this. I do believe that we are seeing rise of technology that can help us to get out of this situation. So the technology is obviously the artificial intelligence, but we need to understand how also the artificial intelligence is evolving. Before artificial intelligence, all content was created manually. So you had someone sitting in front of a CMS interface, which is essentially a form, and doing a lot of typing, clicking, and pointing. But the important thing is that all tasks were executed by humans with some tooling support. Then we've seen the introduction and rise in availability of large language models, which really hit not only the CMS market, I believe the whole world, as a system shock, and everyone's like surprised what they can achieve. And there are some amazing capabilities we've seen with LLMs. And we've also started to see that different vendors across different industries started to introduce some AI functionalities. And that brings us to something we called augmented content creation, where the human is still in control, is still actively driving the workflow, but he's leveraging some functionalities that, help with the productivity, or they, suggest certain things. They can partially automate things every now and there. So we've seen that. However, when we talk to people about how to use AI in their content operations, we get a lot of mixed, messages. On one hand, they are impressed with the capabilities and with what AI can achieve. On the other hand, the AI is really not helping them with the heavy lifting that they need to do in order to get the content out. So the whole situation is fairly similar to what you see on the slide, and similar to the quote, that the AI is taking over of the creative part of content production, but it's not helping them with the laundry, the content laundry. And they would much rather prefer if the AI could do the laundry, so the organizations could focus on creating content themselves, because they want to add their unique flavor to it. They want to respect their brands and their brand guidelines, and really leave the content creation to their creative team, so they can create content that stands out. Now, this was the situation until now, but we are seeing another shift in AI, and we see that agentic systems are these days much more readily available. And we are seeing situations where AI can take over of portion or even whole content workflows, execute on them, and human there acts only as a supervisor. So people can essentially delegate either portions or sometimes even whole jobs to AI that will execute independently, and they can only oversee the results. So as a result, we see that the CMS paradigm is shifting. And I want to demonstrate it on a couple of examples. So first, I want to talk about content audit. Content audit is a process that is, and I dare to say, in many companies hate it. The reason why is it is a very complicated process. It takes multiple people. It takes weeks, sometimes months, to just do the audit. And then you have to also execute on the audit results. And it's oftentimes very expensive. And in each of these steps that are just simple abstraction of the process, you see there's always something that can go south, making it more expensive, making it lengthier, and overall much more complicated. That's also the reason why in many organizations the content audit is rarely done, and as a result, the consistency of their content inventory is falling apart. The brand guidelines are not efficient, and things like that. Now let's see how the content audit can be transformed with agents. So we see that the whole process is much more streamlined, and essentially the human interaction is limited only to defining the audit goals. And even there, an agent can assist with the audit goals definition, either through some wizard or some recommendations or some conversation. And then most of the work is going to be delegated to agents. So set of agents will collect the data for evaluation. Another set of agents will categorize the data, perform analysis against that collection. They will prepare the report and suggestions. And as they do this, the user in control can evaluate the findings, and they can either accept or reject some suggestions, and then again leave the whole execution to an agent. So essentially, what took a whole team and a couple of months can be now reduced to a single person, and it can be essentially done on demand, which as a result, it's much lower in costs and is definitely more approachable than the process before. And if you think about this, if you can get the results on demand, you can essentially make a widget out of this. So you can have this process to be triggered, let's say every morning. A set of agents will go through your inventory against the goals that you defined, and they will flag the content that needs your attention. You will get different groups of content that need your attention, so you know what's urgent, maybe what's left, and maybe what's becoming a problem in the long term, because the AI agents will be able to go through your inventory on a regular basis and scan it. So essentially, we took something that was a lengthy, complicated process and we turned it into a widget. So this is the power of agents and how they change the paradigm. Another example is search. When you think about it, search was always very technical. So you had to form essentially a query. So you were asking always a specific item name, then you added additional parameters such as author name or the range between the article was created or published, and you had to form this query, and you get results that were exactly matching your query. Now with AI, the search can look completely different. Imagine that you want to find out what content in your inventory is affected by a new legislation that is coming up. So what if you could, instead of, going through the whole inventory, just could ask the search, hey, here's the legislation, here's the attached PDF, go through it and identify the content that is, affected and group it by severity. And AI can do that because one agent can go through the document and can, read through it, understanding its context. And then together with other agents, they can go through the inventory, identify the content and group them by severity. So you, again, opening completely new paradigm how you work and search for content. And also, it can also find other related content, not just the one that you're looking for, because maybe there are some additional details that you missed, and there's some content that is related to that is also affected. And the final example that I want to talk about today is A/B test and its configuration, because again, historically, that was a very technical, lengthy process because you had to set up everything, you have to double check everything, you have to create the content. But what if you could do that again now in a matter of minutes, in a form of conversation? So you would talk to an agent and you would specify that you want to have an A/B test. Here's some additional content that you want to test and how the structure should look like. The agent would adjust the structure of the content. It would adjust the model if needed. And then it would walk you through the configuration of the A/B test. So it would give you options, what you want to, set up, what is the portion of audience that you want to direct the new tests to. And you would only, preview the content. And if it's fine, you would leave the execution on the agent. Again, something that could be a matter of hours, maybe days, was streamlined into minutes. So AI in general is transforming how CMS works. So historically, we had user that was sitting in front of Form UI and it was doing all the things manually. Now we'll have users that is collaborating with a set of agents that are doing the execution. So instead of doing all the pointing and clicking yourself, you will have a virtual team that will assist you. And essentially, Agentic CMS can become a new centerpiece in your marketing stack because it will be able to connect to custom LLMs that you might have in your organization, and it can interact with other software that you use through the MCP servers. It can access custom data sources, and it can even work with some external agentic system. So we really believe that the promised land is closed. And we will see that the Agentic CMS will unlock a completely new operating model. We will see that things that took weeks will take minutes. So there will be significant time to impact compression. We'll also see that the teams will be able to achieve more with the same capacity because the agentic systems will allow you to scale your content operations. And at the same time, the cognitive load on the individual team members will reduce. And finally, we'll see that some of the specialized knowledge will not be needed or will only be needed in supervising roles. And more people in your team will be able to achieve specialized tasks because agents will be capable of running and executing on them. And again, you will need those supervising roles only. And what that means for the content lifecycle. For content teams, it means that while today they focus and optimize for content production and distribution, because this is what takes majority of their time, if we can make it autonomous, if you can completely automate it, they can start focusing on the strategic topics in their content production. So more on the evaluation, on ideation, and actually focusing on what can work in this crowded market. Because as I mentioned, we are living in a world that is oversaturated with noise. There's so much content out there today. And I really do not believe that the winning strategy is to produce more content and more and more. I do believe that the winning strategy going forward is going to be better content that is more engaging, content that is standing out in this noise. And I do believe that thanks to Agentic CMS, finally we have tools to make it. Thank you. That's going to be all from my end. and thanks for listening.